Hey students, today we're going to talk about our Poe's Mysterious Death assignment that we are starting. So you're going to be collecting and organizing data on the events surrounding Edgar Allan Poe's death. And as it says here, we still don't know, even today, how he died, even though it was so long ago. So your job is going to be to organize these clues and then build a case for your theory. So you are acting as detectives using these clues, using these sources to determine and build a theory for how you think Edgar Allan Poe died. So, number one here, you have your instructions right here. So you can see those, your source information. This is the thing that would go on your works cited page right there. So please note that so you can add it in your kind of report that you'll write for this. Then we have down here under death clues, we have 14 different sources on this document that you're going to make note of. The other document that you want to have handy as you're reading through this is the Mystery of Poe's Death, this graphic organizer here. Notice that it gives you the date that Poe died on, October 7th, 1849. That will be important for this question here. When was it written in relation to Poe's death? So the first line is done for you. Notice that that corresponds to clue number one. So we have clue number one, and I want to explain the makeup of how these clues are organized. So this part that's highlighted right here, this is essentially a summary of the actual source below. So it says Poe had a pre-existing condition, possibly a brain tumor. His heartbeat was irregular. He could not consume alcohol without producing insanity. So that's just a summary of what the source is going to tell us. Below here, we have the actual source information. So you want to read through that. And below that, next to the dash, you see some information about the background of the source. You see who wrote it, Marie Louise Shue, who was Poe's friend and nurse. You see who it was written to. It was written to John Henry Ingram, who was Poe's biographer. You see the type of source here. It was a letter. And then you see the date of the source, January 23rd, 1875. All those things are going to be important as you determine what his cause of death was. You'll notice that all of those correspond to some of these questions. So the type of document, we notice it's a letter to the author of Poe's biography, the author of the document and the connection to Poe, Marie Louise Shue. Remember, it was right next to that dash, the background info under that first source, who was Poe's friend and nurse. And then when was it written in relation to Poe's death? Notice that we have the date it was written, January 23rd, 1875. And then we did a little math to determine that that was 26 years after his death. This doesn't have to be exact. It doesn't have to be the exact number of days. But note, again, remember, here's the date of his death up here. So you're just doing a little math to say, okay, he died 1849. This source was written 1875, 26 years after Poe's death. That's important to think about. How close was this to his actual death? Because maybe it's a little bit more reliable if it's just a couple months after or a couple days before or after his death rather than 26 years. Why was it written? This is something that you need to make an inference to determine this. It's not just going to tell you necessarily why it was written. Since this is a letter to the author of Poe's biography, we're going to make an inference and say that the point of it being written, the reason it was written, was to publish in Poe's biography. And then the last one, suspected cause of death. This is another thing you're going to have to maybe read between the lines and pull these out of the source on your own, because it's not just going to say, I suspect Poe died of this. You need to look at it and say, what's mentioned in this source? So if we go back to that, it says that his heart beat only 10 regular beats, after which it was suspended. He had lesion on one side of the brain. He could not bear stimulants without producing insanity. She mentions a brain fever here as well, and that sedatives had to be administered with caution. So from that, we write down brain lesion because she mentions it, brain fever, stimulants made him insane. So again, that's something that we pulled out of there, but it doesn't necessarily just say this is what caused his death, right? We're trying to act as detectives, make inferences, and pull these clues out of these sources. So that's what you're going to do for each one of these sources here. And again, the number next to it corresponds to the number on this sheet here. So you're going to fill that out for each one. You also have some vocabulary at the bottom here. So lesion, cholera, stimulants, mania, potu, those are all words, phrases that you might not be familiar with. So that's why we put those at the bottom for you to look at. And again, the date that he died is on the top of the page as well, just to remind you as you work through this. Let us know if you have any questions. Once you have this all filled out, you will be all ready to look at the evidence, come up with a theory, and then write your report detailing the cause of Poe's death.